please state who you are and what position you're in?
My name is Darian Mitchell, and I'm a psychology resident at the Counseling Center.
Right, thank you.
Uh-huh.
I have a few questions for you concerning my Women's Studies final project.
All right.
As you know, I'm doing a project over sex work. I would like your input on some of these questions and see what your view is and what your professional opinion is as.
Okie dokie.
Okay. How would you define sex workers?
Sex workers, I would define that as somebody who, engages in sexual activities for money.
Okay. So would you consider people like strippers or people that are in the porn industry or any field like that as a sex worker?
It seems like that's more based in entertainment, whereas it seems like a sex worker is more along the lines of things that would be more illegal. That's at least, when I hear the term sex worker, I think about, prostitution or sex trafficking, things like that, as opposed to pornography or stripping.
All right. Why do you believe that they enter this field?
The field of sex work,
Yes.
what are we talking about in regards to, again, like prostitution and things like that?
You can answer them separately.
Okay. Well, prostitution, I would think that there's lots of different reasons. I know one could be, especially in like countries that may be, poor, socioeconomic, concerns. So, just, the desire to make money. I think some individuals are some women might be pushed into, engaging in that type of behavior because of, maybe abusive relationships, or sometimes I think there's the potential that, I'm speaking about women, that if they engage in that, then there might be some sort of emotional void that needs to be filled, and they end up, pushing themselves into, prostitution or whatever the case may be because of that. Those would be some of my basic thoughts. Money, maybe some sort of emotional void. Maybe they've been, again, coerced into it by somebody in their lives who's, has, I guess, power over them, maybe emotionally or mentally or whatever the case may be.
Okay, and what about fields such as stripping and pornography?
I would probably lean more towards the money aspect. I think there's a certain glitz and glamour to, maybe more so pornography and maybe stripping or exotic dancing, however you want to term it. And especially given the way things are now, I think that, the money piece is the number one reason. And potentially, and let me go back to maybe like in terms of the prostitution or, I know sometimes there's a potential that people go into that because of there's potential for, alcohol use and drug use, so it might be in the attempt to support those types of habits, those types of behaviors.
Okay. Why do you believe pornography is one of the most popular film industries?
Well, I think because in America, despite the fact that sex is looked at as a taboo topic, sex, I hate to use the cliche, sex sells, but it seems like that's what the case is. If you look in different forms of media, like, different types of commercials, that's the message that's, draws somebody in. And I think the fact that sex is something that's, a part of us as human beings, I think it, taps into, a particular part of us that people find enticing. And I think that's the reason why, pornography can be so popular.
How do you believe society views sex workers?
Well, if it was, like, again, prostitution and things like that, it would be looked at very negatively. I think the stereotype is that all prostitutes are dirty or drug addicts, alcohol abusers, people with quote-unquote, daddy issues, whatever the case may be. I think that's the negative. I think that's the stereotype that people get from, prostitution. Strippers and pornography, That's a tough one. I think kind of going back to, again, feeling some sort of, people might classify them as need to fill some sort of emotional void, or, their dad didn't care about them, or, they need the attention of a man, or whatever the case may be. So I think in terms of like pornography and stripping, it's more of like I said, again, a psychological need that needs to be met. I think that's how people might interpret it.
Do you believe people are looked at differently once it's found out they are sex workers?
Yes, 100%. So, again, I think because whether it's stripping or prostitution or pornography, I think that if that's brought to light about somebody, I think that the first thing that goes to people's minds is that they're a person of loose morals, or no integrity, or no self-respect, that they're maybe just overall a bad person.
Do you believe taking part in sex work affects their mental health?
I think it depends on why they get into it, because I think there might be some things that are pre-existing, and I think that them just being in that particular industry might just exacerbate it. I think more so on in terms of like prostitution or things like that. It's a very, I think it can be a very demeaning thing to engage in prostitution. I definitely feel like if their self-esteem hasn't been damaged before entering something like that, I definitely think that is probably one of the biggest things that could come from being in prostitution is your self-esteem is just totally just decimated. I'm sure that there's possibilities for things like depression to develop, maybe substance dependence, depending on again why it is that the person got into it. I know that there's definitely potential for somebody to kind of numb themselves, if they have to go, do something like prostitution. So I definitely think that depression or low self-esteem, like I said, use of alcohol and drugs can definitely come about from engaging in prostitution. Stripping and pornography, I think that one's hard for me to kind of couch. I think the prostitution one seems like it's has the potential to be, again, much more psychologically, invasive than I guess stripping and pornography, because at least I think in stripping and pornography there's I think that if a person is in it, that they might feel as though they have more of a sense of more of a sense of control over their lives, whereas prostitution, I know that reasons for getting into it, they might not necessarily feel as though they have control. So I would like to think that, or hypothesize that, there's a lot more mental health concerns that could come out of prostitution as opposed to stripping and engaging in pornography. But I could be wrong.
And according to my pop culture professor, sex pornography is one of the top selling fields, but it's also one of the top areas where women can make money. Why do you think that is?
Well, again, I think a lot of it goes to the nature of the country. Women are, it's men first, women second. I think there's still obviously these residual effects of, this patriarchal society that we live in, and women still can be deemed as like second-class citizens and sex objects, and there for entertainment. Those are some of the things that really come to mind. And can you say the question one more time again? You said.
My professor in pop culture says that pornography is one of the most top-selling fields, and women tend to make the most in that field.
Okay.
Out of other jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So just kind of reiterating the things that I just said previously. I think that's the biggest reason. Like I said before, in this country, sex sells. Women are looked at as, in that industry, forms of entertainment. And again, I think it's tapping into, a natural part of who we are as human beings. There's a desire for, sexual pleasure, and, again, women being in that particular type of field, it's going to be easy for them to make that type of money, because men are gonna pay for those types of things, and and enjoy those types of movies or whatever the case may be, or magazines, whatever it is.
Okay.
And wanted to jump back one other initial question, to one of your earlier questions, in terms of I think you asked why people get into it.
Yes.
I think another one is that in terms of prostitution, I think that women might feel I'm speaking about women. Women might feel like they might be doing some sort of service to men, and maybe potentially helping them in other relationships by allowing them to act out fantasies, or to get something that they might not be getting from their current romantic relationship. So there might be this sense of helping somebody.
Okay. One last question.
Yeah.
Do you believe that if women would stop participating in sex work, that they'd be viewed as equals to men, or that it would just deteriorate the equality even more?
Well, I think, given the idea that I think a lot of people would stereotype that women that engage in these types of industries don't have any self-respect. I mean, ideally, I would like to think that if women didn't engage in that maybe some of that would go away. And at the same time, I still think that because of some of the gender differences that have gone on, some of the gender differences and gender roles that have been ascribed to men and women in this country over however many years, I think it would still be very difficult for women to be viewed as equals. So I think it's deeper than just what it is that women engage in terms of prostitution, pornography, and stripping. I think it goes deeper than that, to basic gender roles that men are supposed to be dominant and women are supposed to be submissive, and in those types of, men are logical and women are quote unquote emotional. I think those things still being there it's still going to make it very difficult. But if women didn't engage in those types of industries, I mean, it wouldn't hurt.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.